The silence in the house was heavy enough to choke on. On the kitchen island, an envelope with my name sat next to a boarding pass for a flight to Paris departing today. They did not just leave. They staged a walkout on my wedding day. It was a calculated humiliation, but the person who left that note has no clue that tonight, my wedding dress will stand beside a secret capable of destroying their entire career with a single headline. My name is Hadley Stoneford, and at 34 years of age, I have learned that silence is rarely empty. It is usually heavy with things left unsaid, or in this case, things deliberately removed. I woke up in a house that felt less like a home and more like a vacuum chamber. The air was thin. The usual morning sounds of my mother complaining about the coffee blend or my sister. Blair, loudly debating which shoes would photograph better on the grass, were entirely absent. I walked down the hallway, the floorboards cold against my bare feet. I did not call out their names. A part of me, the part that had been trained by 3 decades of their passive-aggressive theater, already knew the answer. The house was not just quiet. It was staged. I walked into the kitchen. The sunlight was streaming in through the bay windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. But it offered no warmth. There, squarely in the center of the kitchen island, sat a single cream-colored envelope. It was positioned with geometric precision, right next to the crystal vase that was supposed to hold my bridal bouquet later this afternoon. My name was written on the front. I knew that handwriting better than I knew my own signature. It belonged to Blair. It was neat, looped, and sharp, a script that looked elegant from a distance, but felt like barbed wire when you got close enough to read it. My stomach turned over, a slow, cold revolution. But my hands were steady. I am an engineer. I deal in structural integrity and failure points. I reached out and picked up the envelope. It felt light, insignificant, yet I knew it contained a demolition charge. I did not rip it open. I slid my finger under the flap and lifted it, pulling out the single sheet of stiff cardstock inside. There was no "Dear Hadley." There was no "We are sorry." There was just one line, centered on the page, written in black ink. "See how you manage without us." It was a dare. It was a taunt thrown by a teenager. Except Blair was 29 years old. I placed the card down and looked at the other item that had been tucked behind the envelope. Something I had missed at first glance because it was white against the white marble counter. It was a boarding pass. I picked it up. The logo of the airline was bold and blue. The destination read, Paris, Charles de Gaulle. The departure time was 10:45 in the morning. Today, the date was printed clearly October 12th, my wedding day. Stapled to the back of the boarding pass was a receipt. It was not just a travel itinerary. It was a receipt for an upgrade to first class for 3 passengers. The total cost was highlighted in yellow highlighter. Drawing the eye directly to the sum, $15,000. They had spent $15,000 to ensure they were not here. They had spent the equivalent of a down payment on a small studio apartment just to prove that my biggest day was less important than a spontaneous trip to France. I stared at the time again, 10:45 in the morning. If I looked at the wall clock, it was currently 8:30. They were likely already at the airport, sitting in the exclusive lounge, sipping champagne and laughing about the bomb they had just detonated in my kitchen. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. If they had simply not shown up, it would have been painful. But leaving the boarding pass, leaving the receipt, that was a message. It said that I was not worth their time, but I was definitely worth the expense of a grand exit. I turned away from the counter and walked into the living room. I needed to verify the blast radius. The corner where my parents had stacked their vintage Louis Vuitton suitcases yesterday was empty. The indentation in the rug was the only proof they had ever been there. I walked to the bookshelf. We had placed a preliminary wedding album there. A collection of photos from our engagement shoot, meant for guests to flip through during the reception. It was gone. They had removed it. It was a symbolic erasure. They were not just leaving the wedding, they were scrubbing the narrative. They wanted to make it look like they had never supported this, never been part of the preparation, They were rewriting history before the ink was even dry. My phone buzzed in the pocket of my silk robe. I pulled it out. The screen lit up with a notification from Instagram. It was a photo posted 3 minutes ago. The location tag was the international terminal at the airport. The image was high definition, perfectly lit, filtered to enhance the golden hour glow. It showed my mother, father, and Blair clinking crystal flutes of mimosa. They looked radiant. They looked unburdened. The caption was short, written by Blair. Paris calls. Sometimes you just have to choose yourself and leave the toxic drama behind. Bon voyage to us. She had tagged 5 of my bridesmaids. She had tagged my cousins. She had tagged the local gossip columnist who followed our family because of my father's real estate dealings. I stood there in the silent living room, the phone screen glowing in my hand. I felt a pressure building in my chest, a physical need to scream, to throw the vase against the wall, to break something just to make a sound that rivaled the noise in my head. But I did not. I closed my eyes and took a breath. I counted to 4. I exhaled for 4. I am a woman of discipline. I work with high-voltage power grids. I design systems that must withstand hurricanes and ice storms. Panic is a luxury I cannot afford. Hysteria is a variable I learned to eliminate from my equations years ago. If I screamed now, if I called them crying, if I begged them to turn the car around, I would be giving them exactly what they wanted. This was not an accident. This was a performance. Blair was the director. My parents were the willing cast. And I was supposed to be the audience that gave them a standing ovation of misery. They wanted the tragic bride. They wanted the breakdown. They wanted the narrative where Hadley Stoneford, the boring, serious engineer, falls apart because she cannot function without the shining sun of her family to orbit around. I opened my eyes. The tears that had threatened to spill were gone, reabsorbed into a cold, hard resolve. I looked at the empty space on the rug where the suitcases had been. Fine, I thought. If you want to leave, leave, but you do not get to come back when the weather changes. A shadow moved in the doorway. I did not jump. I turned slowly to see Gregory standing there. My fiancé, my husband in less than 10 hours, was wearing a charcoal sweater and dark jeans. He held a mug of black coffee in one hand. Gregory Whitman is not a man who takes up space loudly. He does not stomp. He does not posture. He exists in a room like a deep anchor, steady and immovable. He had been out for a run along the coast. His hair was slightly damp from the salt air. He looked at me. He looked at the phone in my hand. He looked at the empty spot where the luggage had been. He did not ask. Where are they? He did not ask. What is wrong? He is too observant for stupid questions. He saw the tension in my shoulders, the way I was gripping the phone like a weapon. He walked over to me, his steps quiet on the hardwood. He set his coffee down on the side table and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box. It was not the ring box for the ceremony. It was the one he had used to transport the rings from the jeweler yesterday. He opened it. Inside sat the simple platinum band that he was supposed to place on my finger at 5 o'clock this afternoon. Hadley, he said. His voice was low, a rumble that vibrated through the floorboards, grounding me. He took the ring out and took my hand. He did not put it on my finger. He simply placed the cold metal in the center of my palm and closed my fingers over it, making a fist. He covered my fist with his large, warm hand. I saw the post, he said. I looked up at him. You saw it. I have alerts set for your family, he replied simply. I knew the moment they checked in at security. They are gone. Gregory, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, flat and devoid of inflection. They went to Paris on our wedding day. They left a note that looks like a greeting card from a psychopath. Gregory did not flinch. I figured as much. They think I'm going to cancel, I said. They think I am going to be too humiliated to walk down the aisle alone. They think the guests will whisper, and I will hide. And tomorrow the story will be about how the Stoneford family tried to save poor Hadley from a mistake, but it was all too much for her. Gregory squeezed my hand. Is that what you are going to do? No, I said. The word came out sharp. No, I will walk. If I have to walk over broken glass, I will walk. Gregory nodded. He looked down at our joined hands. Good, because there is something you need to know about today. Something I did not tell you because I wanted it to be a surprise, but given the circumstances, you need to understand the battlefield. I frowned. What do you mean? The ceremony, Gregory said. It is not just going to be the 200 guests we invited. Gregory, what did you do? He looked me in the eyes. His eyes are a shade of gray that usually calms me, but right now, they held a fierce intensity. The reception and the vows, they are being live-streamed. I blinked. Live-streamed for who? My grandmother in Florida who could not travel. No, Gregory said. For the Coastal Resilience Fund, the organization that funded the restoration of the bay where we are getting married. They asked if they could broadcast the ceremony as a fundraising event to show the beauty of the preserved coastline. I agreed to it last week. It is going to be on the local news channel's website, and they have pushed the link out to their donor network across the state. I stared at him. The implications crashed into me like a wave. It is going to be public, I asked. Very public, he said. Local television, social media feeds. The link has already been shared 3,000 times this morning. My mind raced. I thought of the boarding pass. I thought of Blair's smug face in the airport lounge. I thought of my mother's obsession with appearances. They had left because they thought they could control the narrative from a distance. They thought they could execute a private humiliation. Something that would stay within the whispers of our social circle. Something they could spin later. They did not know there were cameras. They did not know that by leaving, they weren't just skipping a wedding. They were abandoning a public event. They were about to become the villains in a story that was being broadcast live to thousands of people who cared about the environment, about community, and about decency. They have no idea, I whispered. No, Gregory said. They do not. He paused, and his thumb brushed over my knuckles. If you walk down that aisle alone, Hadley, you are not just a bride whose family ditched her. You are a survivor standing tall while they look like petty deserters. The camera does not lie. It just shows what is there and what is not there. I looked at the ring in my hand. I thought about the $15,000 they spent on first-class seats. I thought about the years of Blair taking credit for my ideas, of my parents telling me to be quieter, to be smaller, to let my sister shine because she needed it more. A cold, sharp clarity settled over me. This was not a tragedy. This was an opportunity. They want a show, I said, my voice steadying, gaining strength. They want everyone to see how pathetic I am without them. I looked up at Gregory. A smile touched my lips, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of an engineer who has just found the fatal flaw in the enemy's design. Let's give them a show, I said. Gregory nodded once. Go get dressed. Hadley, we have a timeline to keep. He turned and walked toward the kitchen to deal with the coffee. Leaving me standing in the living room, I looked at the empty shelf one last time. Enjoy Paris, Blair, I thought, because by the time you land, you are going to wish you had never boarded that plane. I turned and walked toward the stairs. I had a wedding dress to put on, and for the first time in my life, I did not care if it was perfect. I only cared that it was seen. To understand why the silence in my house this morning felt like a verdict rather than an absence, you have to understand the anatomy of a frame job. To most people, betrayal is an emotional event, a matter of broken hearts and tearful confessions. To me, betrayal is a data set. It is a sequence of altered logs, misplaced files, and signatures that look authentic until you check the metadata. I know this because 3 years ago, my own sister turned my career into a stepping stone for her vanity, and my parents poured the concrete to set it in place. I stood before the full-length mirror in the guest room, the silk of my robe cool against my skin, but my mind was not on the wedding dress hanging behind me. I was transported back to the sterile, glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor of the Halcyon Aeronautics Group. That was where my life as a respected professional had first been dismantled. At 31, I was the youngest chief engineer in the history of Halcyon. I managed a team of 40 people. My division was responsible for developing high-density energy storage systems for long-range autonomous drones. We were building the lungs of the next generation of logistics aircraft. It was classified, high-stakes work that required a security clearance and a level of obsessive attention to detail that fit my personality like a glove. I lived for that job. I breathed the filtered air of the lab. Then came the Tuesday morning that changed everything. I arrived at work at 7 o'clock, coffee in hand, ready to review the thermal stress tests from the previous night. My keycard did not work. The little light on the reader flashed red. A harsh, denying blink. I assumed it was a system glitch. I tried again. Red. A security guard I had known for 2 years walked up to me. He did not smile. He asked me to wait in the lobby. 10 minutes later, the vice president of operations and a lawyer from human resources came down. They did not invite me up to my office. They escorted me into a small, windowless meeting room on the ground floor usually reserved for vendor disputes. They placed a folder on the table. Inside was a printout of a transfer log. It showed that at 3 o'clock in the morning on the previous Saturday, a massive packet of data had been copied from the secure server to an external drive. The packet contained the complete schematics for the Project Ether capacitor, our flagship technology. The user ID associated with the download was mine. The digital signature was my encryption key. I stared at the paper. The numbers blurred. I told them it was impossible. I told them I was asleep at 3 in the morning. I told them to check the biometric logs for the building entry, which would prove I was not on the premises. The lawyer looked at me with a pity that felt like acid. He said the download was remote. He said the access came from my personal laptop, using my credentials, bypassing the VPN tunnel with a master override code that only I possessed. I was suspended immediately pending a full investigation. As I walked out of the building with a cardboard box containing only my personal effects, a succulent plant, a framed photo of a bridge, and a spare cardigan, I felt the eyes of the lobby staff on me. In the corporate world, you are innocent until proven guilty, but you are socially dead the moment the accusation is made. I was a leper. I was a liability. I was a ticking bomb that no one wanted to be near. For 2 weeks, I sat in my apartment, locked out of the servers I had built. But I am an engineer. I do not pray for miracles. I look for variables that do not fit the equation. I had backups of my personal router logs. I began to dig. I traced the IP traffic from my home network on the night of the incident. The traffic had indeed come from my house, but it had not come from my laptop. The MAC address, the unique hardware identifier of the device that sent the command, did not match my workstation. It matched a tablet. Specifically, it matched the tablet I had given Blair for her birthday 6 months prior. Blair was 26 then. She was working as an unpaid intern in the communications department at Halcyon, a position I had pulled strings to get for her because our mother insisted she needed a serious name on her resume. Blair had access to the building. She had access to the guest Wi-Fi, but she did not have access to the engineering servers, unless, of course, she had lifted my RSA token from my purse during Sunday dinner and copied the code. I felt a nausea that had nothing to do with food. I kept digging. If she stole the data, where did it go? Blair was not a spy. She did not sell secrets to foreign governments. She craved attention, not money. I searched her name online. It took me less than 10 minutes to find it. The Global Future Tech Summit was holding a competition for young innovators under 30. The finalists had been announced that morning. There, beaming in a promotional photo, was Blair Stoneford. Her submission was titled, "The Infinite Loop, a New Standard in Drone Endurance." I downloaded her abstract. It was not just similar to my work. It was a copy-paste job of my executive summary. She had not even bothered to change the font of the technical diagrams. She had stolen 3 years of my life, my intellectual property, and the proprietary assets of a multi-billion-dollar defense contractor, just to win a plastic trophy and get her face in a magazine. I drove to my parents' house that evening. I did not scream. I laid the papers on the dining room table. The server logs, the MAC address match, the printout of her contest entry. Blair sat there, her face pale. But she did not apologize. She looked at our mother. My mother picked up the papers. She read them. Then she set them down and looked at me. I expected outrage. I expected her to tell Blair to withdraw, to confess, to save my career. Instead, my mother sighed. She smoothed the tablecloth and said the sentence that has echoed in my head every single day for 3 years. Hadley, honestly, your sister is young. She has been struggling to find her footing. You are already established. You are the chief engineer. Would it really kill you to yield a little? I stared at her. Yield, Mom. This is industrial espionage. This is a felony. I lost my job. I am under investigation. Well, my father chimed in, not looking up from his scotch. We can hire a lawyer to make the investigation go away quietly. We know people, but if you expose Blair, you ruin her chances. She finally has something going for her. Don't be selfish. Selfish. They framed my innocence as selfishness. They framed Blair's crime as a struggle. I realized then that in the architecture of this family, I was the load-bearing wall that was expected to crack so the decoration could stay intact. I did not expose her. I could not. If I went to the company with proof that my sister stole the data, the scandal would still destroy me. Who hires a chief engineer whose family steals trade secrets? It would be a messy, public legal battle that would drag the Stoneford name through the mud. And my parents made it clear that if I did that, I would be the one casting the first stone. So I took the fall. I resigned from Halcyon. I signed a non-disclosure agreement that effectively gagged me. I let the company believe it was a negligence issue on my part, rather than malice. I lost my stock options. I lost my reputation in the aerospace sector. I walked away. I pivoted. I left the glamorous world of high-altitude drones and went into the gritty, unglamorous world of utility infrastructure. I started working on grid resilience, clean energy storage for hospitals, and backup systems for coastal towns. It was work that required hard hats and muddy boots, not clean rooms and clearance badges. I told myself I made the switch because I wanted to help people. That was true, partially, but the real reason was that I needed to be somewhere where the shadows were not so deep. I needed a job where the metrics were simple, either the lights turned on or they did not. I could not breathe in the corporate environment anymore. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next knife to find my back. Blair. She won the competition. She used that win to launch her career as a tech influencer and social media consultant. She built a brand on a lie, but the worst part was not the theft. It was the leverage. Over the last 3 years, whenever I tried to set a boundary, whenever I refused to lend her money or promote her questionable projects, she would smile that sweet, sharp smile. "Come on, Hadley," she would say. "We don't want to bring up the Halcyon mess again, do we? People might start asking why you really left. You know how the internet loves a disgraced engineer story." She held my silence hostage. She knew I was terrified of being dragged back into that interrogation room. She knew I feared that the stain would spread to my new life, to the work I was doing to rebuild my integrity. That was why she felt safe leaving the boarding pass on the counter today. That was why she felt comfortable abandoning me on my wedding day. She believed that Hadley Stoneford would never fight back. She believed that I would swallow the humiliation just like I swallowed the blame at Halcyon, because I was too afraid of the noise. She thought she held the remote control to my life. I looked at my reflection in the mirror again. The woman staring back was not the shell-shocked engineer from 3 years ago. That woman had been trying to save her career. The woman standing here today had already lost it and built a better one from the scrap metal. I reached for the zipper of my dress. My hands were steady. My mother had asked me to yield. She had asked me to be the bigger person so Blair could shine. Tonight, I was going to grant her wish. I was going to yield the floor entirely. I was going to step back and let the spotlight hit the Stoneford family with the full, blinding intensity of a 1,000-watt floodlight. I was done being the firewall for their arson. The dress slid over my hips, the white silk settling around me like armor. It fit perfectly. I had paid for it myself. I had paid for everything myself. "You want a reputation, Blair," I whispered to the empty room. "I am going to give you one that lasts forever." I checked the clock. It was time. The makeup artist was waiting downstairs, confused by the silence in the house, likely wondering where the mother of the bride was. I would have to go down there and lie. I would have to smile and say they were delayed. I would have to hold the dam for just a few more hours. But at 5 o'clock, the dam was breaking. And for the first time in 3 years, I was not going to be the one drowning. The man who would become the center of a media firestorm in less than 6 hours did not enter my life like a millionaire. He entered it like a shadow, quiet and unobtrusive, wearing a pair of mud-stained boots and a jacket that had seen at least 5 winters. We met 18 months after I left Halcyon, during a bitter November on the East Coast. I was working as a contract consultant for a nonprofit initiative trying to retrofit an aging coastal grid to survive rising sea levels. It was unglamorous work. My office was a retrofitted shipping container, and my lunch was usually a cold sandwich eaten over a map spread out on the hood of my truck. Gregory showed up on a Tuesday. The site foreman introduced him simply as Greg, a volunteer from one of the donor organizations who wanted to understand the technical hurdles we were facing. I barely looked up. I was used to donors. They were usually retired executives who wanted to feel useful, asking simplistic questions and getting in the way of the excavators. I expected him to last an hour before the cold wind off the Atlantic drove him back to a heated car. He stayed for 8 hours. He did not ask for a tour. He did not ask to shake hands for a photo opportunity. He simply picked up a shovel when the crew was short-handed on a trench line, and later, he stood silently by my shoulder while I argued with a supplier about the tensile strength of the cabling they had sent us. When the supplier tried to talk over me, using that patronizing tone men often reserve for female engineers, Gregory did not step in to save me. He did not play the hero. He just stood there, watching the supplier with a gaze so flat and unblinking that the man stuttered and eventually conceded to my demands. After the sun went down and the crew left, I found him sitting on the tailgate of his truck, a nondescript domestic model, dented on the rear bumper, drinking coffee from a thermos. "You handled him well," he said. It was the first time he had spoken to me directly. "I know the specs," I replied, locking my container. He was trying to offload substandard copper. Gregory poured a second cup of coffee and held it out to me. I took it. The heat seeped through my gloves. "Most people in your position would have leveraged their title to shut him down," Gregory observed. "You used the data. Titles are flammable," I said. Thinking of Halcyon, data is concrete. He looked at me then. It was the first time I really saw him. He had a face that was hard to memorize, clean-shaven, sharp jaw, eyes the color of slate. He was handsome, but in a way that did not demand attention. He looked like a man who was comfortable with silence. "If you did not have to prove yourself," he asked quietly, "what would you build?" The question caught me off guard. For 3 years, every breath I took was about proving myself, proving I was not a thief, proving I was competent, proving I could survive without the prestige of the aerospace industry. No one had asked me what I actually wanted. They only asked what I could deliver. "I don't know," I admitted. "Something that stays standing when the storm comes, I suppose." "Resilience," he said. He tasted the word like it was a good wine. "I like that." That was how it started, not with flowers or dates at expensive restaurants, but with site visits and blueprints. Gregory became a fixture in my life. He never defined his job clearly. He said he worked in logistics and resource allocation, which I assumed meant he was a mid-level manager for a shipping company, or perhaps an operations director for a warehouse. He seemed to have flexible hours, often disappearing for days, and then reappearing at the site with coffee and questions. We fell into a rhythm. Our dates were dinners at roadside diners after long days of inspections. We talked about load-bearing walls, about the efficiency of solar cells, about the ethics of automation. We rarely talked about the past. He never asked about Halcyon, even though a simple Google search of my name would have brought up the articles about the disgraced engineer. At first, I thought he was just polite. Later, I realized he simply did not care about the public record. He was building his own file on me, based on observation. There were signs, of course, clues that I missed because I was looking at the wrong variables. Gregory had a strict, almost paranoid policy about photographs. The first time we went away for a weekend hiking trip in the Appalachians, I raised my phone to take a selfie of us at the summit. He gently but firmly lowered my hand. "I don't exist online, Hadley," he said. "I prefer to keep my life analog." I laughed it off. "Are you in the witness protection program?" He didn't laugh. "I value privacy. In my line of work, anonymity is an asset." I respected it. After the social media circus my sister had created, I found his digital ghost status refreshing. Blair documented every latte she drank. Gregory could walk through a crowded room and leave no trace. It felt safe. It felt like he was the anti-venom to my family's toxicity, but there were moments where the mid-level manager mask slipped. One evening, about 6 months into our relationship, we were eating takeout in his truck while rain hammered against the windshield. His phone rang. It was connected to the car's Bluetooth. Before he could disconnect it, I saw the caller ID. It was just a sequence of numbers, no name. He answered it. His voice changed instantly. The warm, rumbling baritone I knew was replaced by a cold, razor-sharp command. "I told you the terms," he said. There was a pause. "No, the valuation is wrong. If they don't agree to the restructuring by morning, pull the funding, close the deal." He hung up. The silence that followed was thick. "Trouble at the warehouse?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light, though my heart was beating a little faster. That was not the voice of a man who moved boxes. That was the voice of a man who moved mountains. He looked at me, and for a second, he looked tired. Something like that, just internal politics. Then he said something that I filed away, a sentence that I only fully understood today as I stood in my wedding dress. "Hadley," he said, turning in his seat to face me. "If someone loves you for the business card, they will leave you when the card changes color. I have seen it happen. I want a life where the card doesn't matter. I don't care about your card. Gregory," I said honestly, "I don't even know what your official title is." "Good," he said. "Keep it that way," when he proposed. A year later, he did it without fanfare. We were standing on the deck of a rental cabin, watching a storm roll in over the ocean. He didn't get down on one knee. He just took my hand and asked if I wanted to build a life with him. He offered me a ring that was elegant but understated vintage. He said, when we started planning the wedding, I told him I wanted it small. "I don't want a production," I said. "My family. They turn everything into a performance. I just want us, the ocean, and enough air to breathe." "Done," he said. He suggested the location in Maine. He handled the logistics. But as the date approached, a new figure entered the equation, a woman named Eleanor. Gregory introduced her as his godmother. She was a woman in her late 60s, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and a posture that could correct a slouch from across the room. She arrived 2 weeks before the wedding to help with the details. I expected a fussing. Doting elderly relative. What I got was a tactical commander. I watched Eleanor negotiate with the caterers one afternoon. The catering company had tried to change the menu last minute due to a supply issue. Eleanor did not raise her voice. She made one phone call, spoke in a low, terrifyingly calm tone, and 10 minutes later, the owner of the catering company called back to apologize and promised the original menu at a 20% discount. "Your godmother is terrifying," I told Gregory later. "She handles florist contracts like she is negotiating a hostage release." Gregory just smiled. "Eleanor used to run a tight ship. She likes things precise. What did she do before she retired? She managed household affairs for a large estate, he said vaguely. It was a half-truth. I know that now. Eleanor was not just a housekeeper. She was a chief of staff for a dynasty. But at the time, I just thought Gregory came from a background of efficient, serious people. It made sense. He was disciplined. His godmother was disciplined. I never pushed for more. I never asked to see his bank statements. I never asked why his friends who were coming to the wedding all seemed to work in high-finance cities like London and Zurich. I was so relieved to be with a man who didn't care about my family's drama or my past scandal that I blinded myself to the obvious question, how does a logistics manager pay for a wedding venue that usually has a 2-year waiting list 2 nights ago? During the rehearsal dinner, a dinner my parents spent complaining about the wine selection, I had a moment of panic. I pulled Gregory aside. "This is too much," I whispered. "The venue, the setup, can we really afford this? I don't want us starting our marriage in debt. Gregory, I have some savings left. I can transfer." He stopped me. He put his hands on my shoulders and looked me in the eye. "Hadley, stop. But the cost?" "We are fine," he said. "Trust me. I just don't want you trying to impress my parents," I said. "You know nothing is ever enough for them." "I am not trying to impress them," he said. "I am trying to give you the day you asked for." He leaned in closer. "You are marrying me, Hadley. You are not marrying a bank account. You are not marrying a title. You are marrying the man who knows how you take your coffee and knows that you hate the sound of wind chimes. We are marrying each other, not the numbers. Okay." "Okay," I whispered. I believed him. I believed that we were two normal people, scraping together a beautiful day in spite of my difficult family. I did not know that not marrying the numbers was a literal statement. I did not know that the man standing in front of me was not worried about the cost of the wedding because he could have bought the entire venue without checking his balance. I walked into this day thinking the only secret in the room was the one my sister was holding over my head. I had no idea that Gregory was holding a secret so large it would swallow my sister's pettiness whole. When I nodded at him that night, I unwittingly stepped onto a game board where the stakes were millions of dollars and global reputations. Blair thought she was playing chess against a helpless pawn. She did not realize she had just sat down across from a grandmaster who had been waiting 18 months to make his move. And now, as I prepared to walk down the aisle alone, I realized something else about Gregory's question from the beginning. If you didn't have to prove yourself, what would you build? He had given me the answer. He had built a fortress around me, invisible and impregnable, and today, he was going to lower the drawbridge and let the world see exactly what lived inside. The location Gregory had chosen was a small, secluded inlet called Whispering Cove, tucked away on the jagged coastline of Maine. It was a place of stark, fragile beauty. The sky was the color of bruised iron, threatening rain but holding back, creating a ceiling of gray light that made the water look like liquid mercury. The wind was constant here. It whipped through the tall, yellowing seagrass that lined the dunes, creating a hissing sound that competed with the rhythmic crash of the waves against the rocks. Rows of white wooden folding chairs were arranged in a curve facing the water, their legs sinking slightly into the sandy soil. They looked delicate, almost temporary, against the backdrop of the rugged cliffs and the churning ocean. It felt less like a wedding venue and more like an outpost at the edge of the world. I stood inside the small, weathered boathouse that had been converted into a holding area for the bridal party through the dirty glass of the window. I watched the guests arriving. There were about 80 people, mostly friends from my engineering days, a few of Gregory's associates, and the locals who had worked on the resilience project with us. They were bundled in coats and scarves, holding onto their hats against the gusts, but my eyes were drawn inevitably to the front row on the left side of the aisle. It was empty. 4 chairs sat there, reserved signs fluttering frantically in the wind. They were like missing teeth in a perfect smile. The emptiness was loud. It was aggressive. I could see the guests filing in, taking their seats on the right side or in the rows behind the gap. I saw the heads turn. I saw the hands cover mouths as whispers were exchanged. Where is the mother of the bride? Is the father ill? Why is that whole row empty? The questions were not audible through the glass, but I could read them in the body language of the crowd. The confusion was shifting into pity, and pity is a texture I detest. It feels like wet wool against the skin, heavy, suffocating, and impossible to shake off. I turned away from the window. I was alone in the room. There were no bridesmaids giggling over lipstick shades, no mother fussing with my hem. There was just me, the smell of old wood and salt water, and the sound of my own breathing. I reached up and touched the veil pinned to my hair. It was a simple piece of tulle, unadorned. I adjusted it myself in the reflection of a dark window pane. I straightened the shoulders of my dress. I checked my posture. I did not need someone to tell me I looked beautiful. I needed to look formidable. The door opened, letting in a gust of cold air and the sound of the ocean. It was Eleanor, Gregory's godmother. She was wearing a tailored navy suit that looked impervious to the weather. Her silver hair was motionless, likely lacquered into place with the same iron will she applied to everything else. She closed the door firmly, cutting off the wind. She looked at me, then she looked at the empty row of chairs visible through the window, and finally, she looked back at me. There was no pity in her eyes. There was only assessment. She walked over and took both of my hands in hers. Her grip was dry and strong, like clutching a piece of driftwood. "The wind is picking up," she said, her voice steady. "But the foundation is solid. They are talking." "Eleanor," I said. "I can see them whispering." "Let them talk," she replied. "Gossip is the smoke of small fires. It blows away." She squeezed my hands, a pressure that felt grounding. "Listen to me, Hadley. Biology is an accident. Family is an architecture. You build it, stone by stone. Today, Gregory and I, and everyone sitting in those chairs who actually showed up, we are your structure. We are standing here as your family." I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat that I refused to swallow. I would not cry, not yet. "Thank you," I whispered. The door opened again. This time it was Gregory. He was not supposed to see me before the ceremony, but we had already discarded the rulebook when my family boarded that plane to Paris. He looked striking in his suit, dark against the gray light, but his face was serious. He came to my side, standing next to Eleanor. He did not comment on my dress. He looked at my eyes, checking my vitals like an engineer checking a gauge. "We are 10 minutes out," he said. "I am ready." I lied. He leaned in close, his voice lowering so that even the walls couldn't hear. "Remember the cameras. Hadley, the Coastal Resilience Fund crew is set up on the ridge. The live stream is active. They have a wide shot of the bay, but they will zoom in for the vows." My heart hammered against my ribs. The live stream. I had almost forgotten in the immediacy of the pain. Thousands of people, perhaps more, were tuning in to watch a fundraiser for a coastline, and instead, they were about to watch a woman walk down the aisle alone. I thought of Blair in Paris. She was probably refreshing her feed right now, waiting for the moment of humiliation. She wanted to see me falter. She wanted to see the camera pan to the empty seats and then cut to my devastated face. She wanted the narrative to be about loss. I looked at Gregory. "They are watching." "Yes," he said. "So give them something to see." I looked down at the index cards in my hand. They contained the standard vows we had written weeks ago. Phrases about love, honor, and joining our two families together. They felt like ashes in my mouth. I could not say those words. They were written for a reality that no longer existed. They were written for a bride who had a father to walk her down the aisle and a mother to wipe away a tear. "I need a pen," I said suddenly. Gregory blinked, but he reached into his inner pocket and produced a sleek silver pen. He handed it to me without asking why. I walked to the small wooden table in the corner. I turned the index cards over to the blank side. My hand shook for a second. Then I steadied it. I wrote furiously. I scratched out the platitudes. I crossed out the soft, yielding language of a traditional bride. I wrote words that felt like steel beams being riveted into place. I wrote a promise that did not depend on anyone else's permission. "Hadley," Eleanor asked softly. "I am rewriting the narrative," I said, capping the pen. Just then, the door banged open. It was not the wind this time. It was a young woman named Sarah, one of the event coordinators Gregory had hired. She looked pale, her eyes wide with panic. She was holding a tablet. "Mr. Whitman," she said, breathless. "I am so sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this. It just hit the inbox of the Portland Press-Herald and 3 other local news outlets." Gregory stepped forward, his body shielding me instinctively. "What is it?" "It is an anonymous tip," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "They forwarded it to us for comment before running it. The subject line is, 'The Fraudulent Bride, the Truth About the Halcyon Leak.'" The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. I felt the blood drain from my face, my knees locked. "Show me," Gregory said. Sarah handed him the tablet. I stepped up beside him, forcing myself to look. It was an email. The text was viciously precise. It detailed my suspension from Halcyon Aeronautics 3 years ago. It attached the old internal memos about the data breach. It framed me not as a victim of circumstances, but as a dangerous liability who had reinvented herself in the nonprofit sector to hide a history of corporate theft. It claimed I was marrying Gregory to launder my reputation. "They are trying to kill the fundraiser," Sarah whispered. "If this gets out during the broadcast, the donors might pull back." I stared at the screen. "Blair," I said. "She did this. She is not content with leaving. She wants to burn the ground I stand on." Gregory studied the email. He scrolled down to the metadata headers that had been forwarded. His eyes narrowed. "No," he said. His voice was cold, devoid of the anger I expected. It was the voice of the man who closed deals in the dark. "This is not Blair. Look at the syntax. Look at the timing. This was scheduled." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Blair is petty," Gregory said. "She attacks with emotions. This email. This was sent from a secure, encrypted server routed through 3 different countries. The language is legally vetted to avoid direct libel while maximizing damage. This is a press release disguised as a leak." He looked at me. "Your sister might have provided the ammunition, Hadley, but she did not pull the trigger. This came from a professional PR firm, specifically, a firm that specializes in crisis management and offensive opposition research." "Why?" I asked, my mind reeling. "Why would a PR firm target a wedding?" "Because it is not about the wedding," Gregory said grimly. "It is about the live stream. It is about the fund. Someone is trying to sabotage the capital raise by destroying the credibility of the people involved." He handed the tablet back to Sarah. "Ignore it. Tell the press we will have a statement after the ceremony. Do not cut the feed." "But Gregory," Sarah stammered, "if they run the story—" "Let them run it," Gregory said. "They are trying to use fear to make us hide. If we cut the feed, we look guilty. If we proceed, we control the image." He turned to me. He took my face in his hands. His thumbs brushed my cheekbones. "This is bigger than your family drama. Hadley, someone is weaponizing your past to get to me, or to get to the project. Do you understand? You are not a victim of a bad sister right now. You are a target in a corporate war." Strangely, that calmed me. If it was just my sister, it was heartbreaking. If it was a war, well, I was an engineer. I knew how to fortify a position. "I am ready," I repeated, and this time, it was not a lie. "Good," Gregory said. "Then let's go get married." He left the boathouse to take his place at the altar. Eleanor smoothed the back of my dress one last time. "Head up," she commanded. "Chin parallel to the floor. You are a queen entering her court, not a prisoner walking the plank." I stepped out of the boathouse. The wind hit me instantly, snatching at my veil, trying to pull it free. I caught it with one hand and held it. The music began a single cello. deep and resonant, fighting to be heard over the ocean. I turned the corner of the dunes and the aisle stretched out before me. The guests stood up. I saw the sea of faces turn toward me. I saw the moment of confusion when they realized no one was walking beside me. I saw the eyes dart to the empty chairs, then back to me. The whispers stopped, replaced by a silence that was heavier than the wind. I did not look at the ground. I did not look at the empty chairs. I locked my eyes on Gregory, who was standing beneath the driftwood arch at the end of the aisle. He was watching me with an intensity that made the rest of the world blur. I started to walk. One step, the sand shifted under my heels, but I did not stumble. 2 steps, the wind pressed against my chest. A physical resistance, but I pushed through it. I was walking alone, but the image was not one of abandonment. It was one of autonomy. I could feel the cameras on the ridge zooming in. I knew that thousands of miles away, on a screen in Paris, my family was watching. I knew that in newsrooms across the state, editors were debating whether to run the smear piece. I did not care. I reached the altar. I stood next to Gregory. He took my hand, and his grip was warm and solid. We turned to face the officiant, but then I turned to face him. "I have my own vows," I said, my voice clear enough to be picked up by the lapel microphone Gregory was wearing. The officiant stepped back. The guests leaned in. The only sound was the wind and the waves. I looked at Gregory, but I was speaking to the camera. I was speaking to the past. "Gregory," I began, my voice not wavering, "I do not stand here today because I was given away. I belong to no one but myself. I stand here because I walked the path alone to get to you." I paused. The wind whipped a strand of hair across my face, but I didn't move it. "I have survived storms that tried to erode my foundation," I continued, thinking of the accusations, the firing, the empty house this morning. "I have been hollowed out and rebuilt, and I promise you this, I will not be the shelter that collapses when the rain comes. I will be the concrete and the steel. I will be the grid that holds the power when the rest of the world goes dark. I choose you, not as a half looking for a whole, but as a whole looking for a partner." I saw Gregory's eyes shine. I saw Eleanor in the front row, nodding imperceptibly. "Let the world say what it wants," I finished, my voice dropping to a fierce whisper that the microphone caught and amplified over the roar of the ocean. "Let them try to tear down what we have built. They will find that we are not made of glass. We are made of things that endure." I stopped. The silence in the cove was absolute. The wind seemed to hold its breath for a second, and then, just as the officiant cleared his throat to speak, I felt it. A single, hot tear escaped from my left eye. I did not wipe it away. I let it roll down my cheek, a solitary piece of evidence that I was human. Caught by the high-definition lens of the camera on the ridge, it was not a tear of sadness. It was the overflow of a dam that was holding back an ocean. And as it fell, I knew that the image, the bride standing alone in the wind, speaking of steel and survival, while her family partied in Paris, was being beamed into living rooms across America. I had just started the war, and I had fired the first shot without even raising a weapon, while Gregory and I were sharing a quiet, wind-blown toast of champagne in a tent that smelled of salt and pine needles. A digital nuclear winter was descending upon my family 3,000 miles away. I did not see it happen in real time. I was too busy shaking hands with engineers and accepting hugs from people who actually loved me, but the internet never sleeps, and it certainly never forgives. To understand the magnitude of the disaster that befell the Stoneford family in Paris, you have to understand the split-screen reality of that afternoon. On one side of the screen, there was Blair, based on the screenshots my friends saved for me later. My sister spent the first 4 hours of her Parisian getaway trying to win a public relations war that she did not realize was actually a suicide mission. She posted 15 stories on Instagram between the time her flight landed and the time she sat down for dinner. One photo showed her holding a Ladurée macaron with the Eiffel Tower in the blurry background. The caption read, "Sometimes self-care means booking a flight and leaving the negativity behind. choosing peace over drama. She tagged her outfit. She tagged the airline. She used hashtags like toxic family survivor and Paris escape. She was painting a masterpiece of victimhood, implying that she had been forced to flee a hostile environment rather than admitting she had abandoned her sister's wedding out of spite. She wanted her followers to believe that I was the villain, the bridezilla who had driven her gentle, loving family across the Atlantic. On the other side of the screen, however, was the live stream from Whispering Cove. The Coastal Resilience Fund had done their job too well. The camera crew, professional and cinematic, had not cut away when I walked down the aisle alone. They had not panned to the ocean to hide the empty chairs. They kept the lens focused tight on my face. They captured the wind whipping my veil. They captured the absolute solitude of my walk. And most importantly, they captured the audio of my rewritten vows with crystal clarity. The clip of me saying, "I do not stand here today because I was given away. I belong to no one but myself," hit the internet at 3 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Standard Time. It did not just go viral, it detonated. By 4 o'clock, it had 2 million views on TikTok. The comments section was not a debate. It was a riot. People were not asking why my family was missing. They were dissecting the footage and realizing the truth. They saw the empty front row. They saw the reserved signs flapping in the wind. They saw the sheer, undeniable grit in my posture versus the performative gloss of Blair's Instagram feed. And then, the local news station in Maine dropped the hammer that shattered the glass house my parents had built during the broadcast of the ceremony. The news producer decided to run a scrolling banner of text at the bottom of the screen to give context to the event. They wanted to highlight the importance of the donors. So, right as Gregory was placing the ring on my finger, a graphic appeared in bright blue and white text. Gregory Whitman, founder of Whitman Harbor Capital, lead donor, $250 million to coastal grid infrastructure, $250 million. That number did not just sit on the screen, it burned itself into the retinas of every person watching. Up until that moment, the narrative was about a sad bride and a cruel family. Suddenly, the genre shifted. It was no longer a drama. It was a revenge thriller. The internet realized that the negativity Blair was running away from was actually a wedding to a man whose net worth could likely buy the entire airline she had flown on. The reaction was instantaneous. Users began tagging Blair in the comments of the news clip. "Did you know your brother-in-law is Gregory Whitman? Imagine skipping a billionaire's wedding to eat a macaron." The fumble of the century. This brings us to the restaurant in Paris. I know what happened there not because my parents told me, but because a 22-year-old American tourist named Jessica was sitting at the table next to them. Jessica, like everyone else under the age of 30, was scrolling through TikTok while waiting for her escargot. She recognized Blair from the trending page. She recognized my parents from the airport photo that was now being mocked globally, and Jessica started recording the video, which was uploaded with the caption, "POV. You are sitting next to the family that fumbled the bag," is shaky, but devastatingly clear. It shows my family sitting at a white-clothed table in a bistro that looks expensive but touristy. My mother is looking at her phone, her face draining of color until she looks like a wax figure melting under heat. My father is staring at a tablet, his mouth slightly open, and Blair is holding a glass of red wine. In the video, you can hear my father's voice. It is loud, cutting through the ambient noise of the restaurant. "Whitman," he says, his voice cracking. "Gregory Whitman, the guy from the Harbor Capital deal, the one blocking the acquisition." You can see the gears turning in his head. My father is a broker. He chases commissions. He had been complaining for months about a hostile entity that was holding up a massive infrastructure buyout he was trying to facilitate. He had never met the principal of that entity. He only knew the firm's name. He just realized that the hostile entity was the man he had ignored for 18 months. He realized that the man who had been sitting in his living room, politely drinking bad coffee and enduring his insults, was the same man who held my father's financial future in his pocket. Then the camera pans to Blair. She is reading the comments. Her thumb is scrolling frantically. She is seeing the words, gold digger, fool, jealous sister. She is seeing the number 250 million. She is realizing that her narrative of Hadley the charity case has just been nuked from orbit. In the video, her hand shakes, the wine glass slips. It does not just fall, it shatters against the edge of the table. Red wine explodes across the pristine white tablecloth, splashing onto my mother's cream cashmere sweater. Blair does not apologize. She stands up, her chair screeching against the floor. "It is a setup," she screams. Her voice is shrill, breaking into hysteria. She did this on purpose. She knew she wanted to humiliate us. The restaurant goes quiet. The camera zooms in on Blair's face. It is a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. It is not the face of a victim. It is the face of someone who bet everything on a lie and just watched the truth bankrupt them. "She made us leave," Blair yells at my father, rewriting history in real time. "She manipulated us so we would look bad. It is a trap." My father grabs her arm to silence her, looking around at the staring diners. But the damage is done. Jessica stops recording. That video garnered 6 million views in 12 hours. Back in Maine, I was sitting at the head table, listening to a toast from one of my engineers, when Gregory leaned over. He placed his phone on the table. "Face up. You might want to see this," he said quietly. I watched the wine glass shatter. I watched my sister scream. I watched the comments rolling in like a tidal wave. Team Hadley, the best revenge is living well, and marrying rich doesn't hurt. That scream is the sound of an inheritance evaporating. I looked up at Gregory. "They know who you are." "Yes," he said. "The anonymous email forced our hand. If we hadn't put my title on the screen, the press would have run with the fraudulent bride story. We had to override their narrative with a stronger one." "My father," I said, realizing the connection. "He mentioned the Harbor Capital deal in the video. You are the one blocking his commission." Gregory took a sip of his water. "I am not blocking it. Hadley, I am ensuring due diligence. The company your father represents cuts corners on safety compliance. Whitman Harbor Capital does not invest in infrastructure that collapses. I told him that via email months ago. He just never bothered to check who owned the capital firm." He looked at me with that same level gaze. "I told you, I don't mix family and business. But if your family's business is bad for the community, I don't give them a pass just because they share your DNA." It was ruthless. It was fair. It was exactly why I loved him. By midnight, the internet had pivoted from gossip to investigation. The financial journalists had woken up. Twitter threads were already dissecting the connection between my father's brokerage firm and Gregory's investment portfolio. They found the public records of the stalled deal. The narrative solidified. The Stoneford family had bullied their engineer daughter for years, unaware that she was the only thing standing between them and the man who controlled their financial destiny. They had abandoned her to humiliate her, and in doing so, they had insulted the one man they could not afford to offend. Blair tried to pivot one last time, around 2 a.m, while I was taking the pins out of my hair in our hotel suite. A notification popped up. Blair had deleted all her Paris stories, the macarons, the champagne, the toxic survivor posts, all gone. In their place was a text post, black background, white text. "I am heartbroken to see how my actions today have been misinterpreted. My family and I have been going through a private struggle that the public does not see. We traveled to Paris to heal, not to hurt. I love my sister, and I'm so proud of her. I had no idea about Gregory's success, but money has never mattered to us. We only care about family. Please respect our privacy as we navigate this misunderstanding." I read it aloud to Gregory. "It sounds like a robot wrote it," I said. "It sounds like a crisis PR firm wrote it," Gregory corrected. "Specifically, the cheapest package available." He was right. The internet tore it apart. They pointed out that you cannot accidentally buy 3 first-class tickets to Paris on your sister's wedding day. They pointed out the timestamps of her earlier mocking posts. They pointed out that Money never mattered is exactly what people say when they just found out they lost a lot of it. My phone rang. It was my mother, then my father, then Blair. I let it ring. "Are you going to answer?" Gregory asked. "No," I said. I turned the phone off and placed it in the drawer of the nightstand. "Silence is an answer," Gregory said. "It is the loudest answer I have," I replied. By engaging, I would have given them a platform. I would have made it a feud. By staying silent, I left them screaming into the void. I left Blair fighting with random strangers on the internet. I left my father trying to explain his outburst to his partners. I walked out onto the balcony of our room. The ocean was dark and vast. The wind had died down. Somewhere over that water, in a time zone 6 hours ahead. My family was likely sitting in a hotel room, watching their social capital disintegrate, unable to sleep. I thought about the $15,000 they spent to leave me. I thought about the millions of people now rallying behind the lonely bride. I took a deep breath of the salt air, for the first time in 34 years. I did not feel the need to fix their mess. I did not feel the need to provide structural support for a building that was determined to fall down. "Let it burn," I whispered. And then I went inside to my husband, leaving the world to finish the fight I hadn't even started. The morning after the wedding did not bring peace. It brought a digital siege. I woke up to a phone that had vibrated itself off the nightstand and onto the floor. When I picked it up, the notification count was not a number. It was a blur. My mother had called 23 times. My father, 14. Blair, a staggering 40 calls, and over 100 text messages. I sat on the edge of the bed in the hotel suite, the gray light of the Maine morning filtering through the heavy curtains. Gregory was already up, sitting at the desk in the corner, typing furiously on his laptop. He looked calm, but the tension in his jaw told me he was in war mode. I opened the messages. I needed to see the blast radius. My mother's texts were a masterclass in gaslighting. "Hadley, pick up. We are so worried. The internet is saying terrible things. You know we didn't mean to hurt you. We just needed a break. Please tell them to stop. Hadley, your father is having chest pains. Do not do this to us." My father's texts were commands, written as if I were still his disobedient employee. "Call me immediately. You need to issue a statement clarifying that this was a misunderstanding. You are damaging my reputation. Fix this." And then there was Blair. Her messages oscillated between manic rage and pathetic begging. "You planned this. You knew Gregory was rich and you hid it to make us look stupid. I'm losing followers by the second. Brands are dropping me. Please, Hadley, tell them we talked. Tell them I sent a gift. I hate you. Please pick up." "You do not owe them a conversation," Gregory said without turning around. His voice was low, cutting through the silence of the room. "You do not owe them an explanation, and you certainly do not owe them a defense." I looked at the screen, at the stream of desperation from the people who had abandoned me less than 24 hours ago. "I know," I said, "but I owe myself a proper ending. I cannot just ghost them. Gregory, that is what they did to me. If I walk away now without closing the circuit, I am just running." "We are not running," Gregory said. He turned his chair to face me. "We are escalating." He gestured to the laptop. "My legal counsel just sent over a preliminary forensic report on the smear campaign, the email that was sent to the press yesterday, the one accusing you of the data theft." "The one from the PR firm?" I asked, standing up and tightening my robe. "Yes, we traced the retainer agreement," Gregory said. "These firms are good at hiding their tracks, but they are sloppy when they get greedy. We found the initial deposit that activated the campaign." I walked over to the desk. On the screen was a complex flowchart of wire transfers. "The campaign was not a reaction to the wedding," Gregory said, pointing to a date on the timeline. "Look at the timestamp. The deposit was made 3 weeks ago." I felt the blood drain from my face. 3 weeks. But that means... It means this was not a spontaneous act of pettiness because they were jealous of your happiness, Gregory said grimly. This was a premeditated strike, They booked the Paris trip and paid for the defamation package on the same day. I stared at the screen. Who paid for it? Blair does not have that kind of money. A crisis firm like that charges $10,000 just to open a file. Gregory clicked a file. It opened a bank statement for a shell company called NS Consulting. The funds originated from a business account, Gregory said. It is a holding company used for miscellaneous expenses. It is registered to your father. The room spun. I had to grip the edge of the desk. My father, I whispered. My father paid to have my reputation destroyed on my wedding day. He authorized the budget, Gregory said. Blair might have written the copy, but your father signed the check. It was a line item. Hadley. They budgeted for your destruction. I felt a coldness settle in my chest that was deeper than the ocean outside. I had thought my father was just weak. A man who let his wife and younger daughter run the show. I realized now he was not weak. He was complicit. He had treated my life like a liability to be liquidated. Why? I asked. What does he gain? Distraction, Gregory said. And leverage. If you are discredited, you cannot speak up about his business practices. Remember, you are an engineer. You know where the bodies are buried in his past projects. He closed the laptop. But he made a miscalculation. He thought he was attacking his daughter. He did not realize he was attacking the wife of the man who holds the contract for his biggest potential commission. Gregory picked up his phone. He dialed a number. He did not put it on speaker. This is Whitman, he said. Execute Clause 4, Paragraph B of the Grid Modernization Agreement. Immediate termination for cause. Yes, the cause is reputational risk and failure to meet ethical compliance standards. Send the notice now. He hung up. What did you do? I asked. I removed your father's brokerage firm from the Coastal Grid project, Gregory said simply. Whitman Harbor Capital has a strict policy against working with partners who engage in malicious litigation or defamation. By funding a smear campaign against my wife, he violated the morality clause of the preliminary agreement. That contract, I said, my mind racing through the numbers I had heard my father brag about, was worth nearly $3 million in commission fees to his firm. It was, Gregory corrected. Now it is worth $0. The impact was immediate. Less than 20 minutes later, my father's texts stopped being commands and started being frantic, incoherent pleas. Gregory just called the lawyers. Hadley, what is happening? They are pulling the contract. You have to stop him. We can fix this. I will fire the PR firm. I will blame Blair. Just get him to rescind the notice. I watched the messages roll in. For the first time, I saw my father not as the imposing patriarch who controlled the dinner table, but as a man drowning in a riptide of his own making. He was willing to throw Blair under the bus to save his commission. He was willing to blame Blair for a campaign he had paid for. He is panicking, I said. He should be, Gregory said. The news is already hitting the trade journals. Whitman Capital drops Stoneford brokerage over ethics violations. In his world, that is a death sentence. No one will insure his next deal. I walked to the window. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt a profound, hollow exhaustion. They really hate me, I whispered. It was not just indifference, Gregory. It was active malice. It wasn't hate, Gregory said gently. Coming up behind me, it was commerce. You were an asset they couldn't control, so they decided to write you off. It is colder than hate. 2 hours later, the concierge rang the doorbell of our suite. A delivery for Mrs. Whitman, he said. It was not flowers. It was a plain white envelope, sealed with tape. There was no stamp. A young woman dropped this off at the front desk, the concierge said. She seemed distressed. She asked that it be given to you immediately. She is waiting in the lobby bar. I took the envelope. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was the same handwriting that had been on the note in my kitchen yesterday. Blair was here. She had flown back. She had left Paris, left our parents, and flown across the Atlantic overnight to find me. I opened the envelope. The letter inside was written on hotel stationery from the airport Marriott. The ink was smudged in places, as if she had been crying or sweating. Hadley, I am downstairs. I did not bring Mom and Dad. They are still in Paris fighting with the airline. Please see me. Not as your sister, but as someone who is scared. I know what it looks like. I know about the PR firm. But you do not know the whole story. I didn't start this. I was approached. Someone reached out to me 2 months ago and told me you were going to ruin the family if we didn't take you down a peg. They gave me the contacts. They gave Dad the account number to transfer the money. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am telling you that we are both being played. If you do not come down, I understand. But if you want to know who really bought the ticket for my trip, you will meet me. Blair. I read the letter twice. My hands were shaking. She is downstairs, I said. Gregory took the letter from me. He read it quickly, his eyes scanning the text with the precision of a scanner. She says she was approached, Gregory murmured. That tracks. What do you mean? The level of sophistication in the attack against you, Gregory said. It was too high for Blair. She is a social media influencer, not a corporate saboteur. And your father, he is greedy, but he is lazy. He wouldn't organize a multinational smear campaign unless someone handed him the blueprint. He looked at me. Someone weaponized your family against us. Hadley. Who? I asked. Who hates us this much? Not us, Gregory said. Me, or rather, my position. He walked back to the laptop and opened a new window. It was a dossier on a rival investment firm. Apex Meridian. I have been in a bidding war for the last 6 months, Gregory explained. A hostile takeover of the regional energy grid. Apex Meridian wants to buy it, strip it for assets, and raise prices. I am trying to buy it to turn it into a non-profit cooperative. It is a difference of billions of dollars over the next decade. And what does my sister have to do with a billion-dollar energy war? Apex knows they cannot beat me on capital, Gregory said. So they tried to beat me on stability. If they could cause a scandal, say, a fraudulent bride, a messy divorce before the marriage even starts, a connection to a thief, they could spook my board of directors. They could force me to step down or withdraw the bid. He tapped the letter. They found the weak link in my armor. You, and they found the people most willing to sell you out. Your family. I sat down on the sofa. The pieces fell into place with a sickening click. The sudden Paris trip, the expensive PR campaign, the first-class tickets, my father's sudden confidence. It wasn't just pettiness, it was a transaction. My family had sold me to Gregory's enemies. They had taken a payout to destroy my wedding so that a hedge fund could destroy Gregory's deal. They were paid, I whispered. Blair says she was played. But she took the ticket. She took the upgrade. Yes, Gregory said. She did. I need to see her, I said. Hadley, Gregory warned. It is a risk. She could be wearing a wire. She could be looking for a soundbite to save herself. No, I said, standing up. She is terrified. Blair is a bully, but she is a coward. If she is here alone, it means her backers have abandoned her. She is radioactive. I walked to the door. I am not going down there to forgive her. Gregory, I am going down there to get the name of the person who called her. Gregory stood up. He buttoned his jacket. Then I'm coming with you, he said. No, I said. If you come, she will perform. She will play the victim for the rich man. I need her to talk to her sister, the sister she thinks she can manipulate. I put my hand on the doorknob. I need to look her in the eye and see if there is anything left of the girl I grew up with, or if she is just a shell company like Dad's account. 5 minutes, Gregory said. If you are not back in the elevator in 30 minutes, I am coming down with security. Make it 40, I said. I opened the door and walked out into the hallway. The carpet was soft, swallowing the sound of my footsteps. I was walking toward the lobby to meet the person who had tried to burn my life to the ground. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the fire. I was holding the extinguisher. My phone buzzed one last time before I entered the elevator. It was a text from my father. Don't listen to her. She is lying. I did this for us. I deleted the thread. The elevator doors closed. And I began the descent. 2 weeks after the wedding that wasn't. I stood backstage at the McCormick Place Convention Center in Chicago. The air conditioning was humming with that specific, industrial drone that always calms me. It sounds like a turbine, and turbines are predictable. I was there to deliver the keynote address for the National Infrastructure Resilience Summit. It was a booking I had accepted months ago, long before I became a viral sensation, long before my face was splashed across tabloids as the runaway bride who ran into a billionaire. The organizers had offered me extra security. They had offered to let me cancel, but I refused. Canceling would have looked like hiding, and I was done hiding. I looked down at my outfit. I had chosen it carefully, no white silk, no lace. I was wearing a charcoal gray suit, tailored and sharp. My hair was pulled back in a low bun. I wore no jewelry except for the plain platinum band Gregory had given me, the one that cost less than a tank of gas, but meant more than the Hope diamond. I did not wear the engagement ring. I did not want the light to catch a diamond and distract from my words. "Ms. Stoneford," the stage manager whispered into his headset. "You are up in 30 seconds. "Thank you," I said. I walked toward the curtain. I could hear the hum of the crowd. 3,000 engineers, city planners, and policymakers were out there. But I knew they weren't just there to hear about power grids. They were there to see the woman who had publicly dismantled her own family. I stepped out. The lights were blinding. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust, to filter the glare and see the darkened auditorium. I walked to the podium, placed my notes down though I didn't need them, and looked out at the sea of faces. And then I stopped, in the front row. Directly in my line of sight sat 3 people. My father, wearing a suit that looked a little too loose, as if he had lost weight rapidly. My mother, clutching a designer handbag like a shield. And Blair, they were not supposed to be there. This was a ticketed industry event. But then I remembered the media circus. They had likely bought VIP passes. Or perhaps they had leveraged their newfound infamy to get seats. It was an ambush, a feel-good reunion staged for the cameras that were lining the back of the room. They were waiting for me to acknowledge them. They were waiting for me to smile, to wave, to offer some sign of public reconciliation that would redeem their image and save my father's business. Blair was looking up at me with wide, glistening eyes, a look of practiced contrition that I had seen her practice in the mirror 1,000 times. I felt a flash of anger, hot and sharp. But then I looked at the microphone. I did not smile. I did not wave. I did not even blink. I looked right through them, focusing on the exit sign at the back of the hall. "Good morning," I said. My voice was steady, amplified through the massive speakers. "Today, I want to talk about structural failure." The room went quiet. "In engineering," I continued, "we often talk about load-bearing capacities. We calculate how much weight a beam can hold before it snaps, but we rarely talk about the fatigue that happens before the snap, the microscopic fractures, the invisible corrosion." I gripped the podium. "We assume that if a structure is standing, it is sound, but sometimes a structure is standing only because it is leaning on something else, and when you remove that support, you see the rot." I was speaking about bridges, but everyone in the room knew I wasn't talking about concrete. 3 years ago, I said, I experienced a catastrophic system failure. I was working as a lead engineer at a major aerospace firm. I was proud of my work. I trusted the system. And then, a glitch occurred. A signature appeared on a document I did not sign. A data packet was transferred that I did not authorize. I saw my father shift in his seat. He looked down at his shoes. "I was accused of negligence," I said. "I was accused of theft, and the people who had the data logs, the people who knew the IP address, came from a device that wasn't mine. They stayed silent." I paused. The silence in the room was absolute. They stayed silent because the truth was inconvenient. They stayed silent because the person who actually stole the data was someone they wanted to protect, someone who needed a win. Someone who needed to borrow my credibility because they hadn't built their own. I looked down at Blair. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking at the camera crews on the side of the stage, checking her angles. She wiped a tear from her cheek. It was a perfect, cinematic tear. I lost my job, I said. I lost my reputation. And for a long time, I thought it was my fault. I thought I hadn't been careful enough. I thought I needed to work harder to earn back their trust. I took a breath. But I learned something about resilience in that darkness. Resilience is not about enduring abuse. Resilience is not about carrying the weight of a collapsing building just because you are the strongest pillar. I leaned into the microphone. Resilience is knowing when to condemn the building. A ripple went through the crowd. We are taught that loyalty is a virtue, I said. Especially in families, especially in corporations. We are taught to cover up the cracks, to paint over the rust, to forgive the glitches because we have a shared history. I shook my head slowly. But that is bad engineering, and it is a bad way to live. I looked directly at the front row now. I let my eyes rest on Blair's tear-streaked face. There are some connections that cannot be repaired, I said, my voice dropping to a register that felt like gravel and silk. There are some relationships that do not need to be severed with a knife. They just need to stop being supported. I saw Blair flinch. It was physical. The line hit her like a slap. Stop being supported. It meant financial support. It meant emotional support. It meant the reputational support she was desperate to leech off me right now. When you stop propping up the things that hurt you, I finished, you find out what can actually stand on its own. And usually, you find that you are the only thing left standing. The room erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was a roar. People stood up. They understood. They knew the backstory, and they saw the woman in the gray suit drawing a line in the sand that was visible from space. But the scene wasn't over. Blair, sensing the room turning against her, decided to play her trump card. She stood up. She was wearing a soft pink dress, something that made her look young and vulnerable. She covered her face with her hands and let out a sob that was loud enough to be picked up by the stage monitors. She looked at me, pleadingly. "Hadley," she cried out, "please, we just want you back." It was a performance designed to break hearts. She wanted the audience to see a cold, successful sister rejecting a weeping, repentant sibling. But the audience didn't melt. They stared. They had seen the Paris photos. They had seen the wine glass video. They saw the calculation in her eyes. Then, a man in the third row stood up. He was wearing a press badge. He didn't have a microphone, but he projected his voice with the authority of someone who knows he is holding a grenade. "Ms. Stoneford," he shouted, addressing me but pointing at Blair. "Is it true that the apology letter your sister posted yesterday, the one claiming she was manipulated, was drafted by the Sterling Group?" The name Sterling Group sucked the air out of the room. It was a PR firm notorious for representing disgraced politicians and oil companies caught in spills. They were known for gaslighting victims and fabricating narratives. Blair froze. Her hands dropped from her face. The tears stopped instantly. "What?" she stammered. The journalist held up a tablet. "I have a leaked invoice," he said. "It shows a payment of $5,000 from your father's account to the Sterling Group for crisis narrative generation, the victim angle. The metadata on your apology post matches their server." The crowd gasped. It was the smoking gun. The apology wasn't real. The "I was manipulated" story wasn't real. It was just another product they had bought to try and save face. Blair looked at the journalist, then at me. Her mask crumbled. The vulnerable sister vanished, replaced by the cornered animal I had seen in the kitchen so many times. "That is a lie," she screamed. Her voice was shrill, ugly. "You are hacking us. You are ruining my life." She didn't run away. She ran toward me. She scrambled over the low barrier separating the VIP section from the stage. She was coming for the microphone. She wanted to scream her defense. She wanted to hijack my moment. "Let me speak," she yelled, clawing at the stage edge. "She is lying. She is the one who stole the data. She is the thief." The security guards moved fast. 2 large men in black suits intercepted her before she could climb the stairs. They didn't tackle her. They just blocked her path. A wall of muscle. Blair threw herself against them, flailing. "Get off me! I am her sister. Tell them. Hadley, tell them I am the talent. You are just the mechanic. You are just the mechanic." The words rang out through the hall. The microphone caught them. The crowd went dead silent. In her rage, Blair had just confessed. She had just revealed exactly how she saw me, to her. I was just the mechanic. The person who fixed things, the person who did the work, so she could be the talent. I stood at the podium, untouched, unmoving. The security guards gently but firmly began to escort her out. My parents were already hurrying up the aisle, heads down, abandoning her for the second time in 2 weeks. Blair looked back at me over her shoulder. Her face twisted in hate. I leaned into the microphone one last time. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't sound angry. I sounded like an engineer who had just signed off on a demolition order. "You are right, Blair," I said. "I am the mechanic." I paused, letting the words hang there. "And I just fixed the glitch." I turned and walked off the stage. Behind me, the applause was deafening, but I barely heard it. I was already thinking about the next project. The old system was gone. It was time to build something new. The applause from Chicago had faded, replaced by the low, rhythmic hum of a server cooling fan. We were no longer in a wedding venue or a conference hall. We were in the secure conference room of Gregory's legal counsel in downtown Boston. The view outside was of a rainy city skyline, but no one was looking out the window. Our attention was fixed on the 3 large monitors mounted on the wall. This was the autopsy, after the Chicago disaster, where Blair had publicly immolated her own credibility. My family had gone silent, but silence is not the same as inactivity. Gregory had mobilized a team that made the FBI look like amateurs. We had forensic accountants, cybersecurity analysts, and private investigators working in shifts for 48 hours. "We have the map," Gregory said. He was standing at the head of the table, his sleeves rolled up, looking less like a husband and more like a general. "It is ugly, Hadley, but it is complete." I sat with a cup of cold tea, staring at the center screen. It displayed a complex web of lines connecting bank accounts, shell companies, and email servers. It looked like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream, except every line was backed by a transaction ID. "Walk me through it," I said. My voice was calm. The engineer in me had taken over. I wasn't looking at the betrayal of my flesh and blood. I was looking at a structural failure analysis. "Start with the money," Gregory said, nodding to his lead investigator. A sharp-eyed woman named Sarah. Sarah tapped her tablet. "The PR campaign that targeted your wedding, the one run by the Sterling Group, cost $80,000 up front, with a $50,000 bonus clause for high-impact media placement, as we established. The initial payment came from your father's holding company." "We knew that," I said. "Yes," Sarah corrected, "but we found out where your father got the money. His holding company has been insolvent for 9 months. He didn't have $80,000. Hadley, he didn't even have $8,000. She clicked a button. A new line appeared on the screen, bright red, connecting my father's account to an entity in the Cayman Islands. 3 days before the wedding, your father received a wire transfer for $200,000 from a company called Obsidian Ventures. He used half to pay the PR firm and the travel expenses for Paris. He used the other half to pay off a lien on his primary residence. I felt a cold shiver. "He was in debt. Deep debt," Sarah said. "Gambling debts, bad real estate leverage. He was facing foreclosure. This wire transfer saved his house. So he sold me," I said, the words tasting like copper. "He sold my reputation for $200,000 to keep his house." "It gets worse," Gregory said softly. "Look at the contract." Sarah pulled up a scanned document. It was a consulting agreement between my father and Obsidian Ventures. "The money wasn't a loan," Sarah explained. "It was a fee for services. The service listed is reputational management, and asset devaluation. And there is a clause here. Paragraph 5. It guarantees him a position. I leaned in. Paragraph 5. Upon the successful destabilization of the target, H. Stoneford, the contractor, Father shall be retained as the exclusive broker for the acquisition of the regional coastal grid by Apex Meridian. Apex Meridian, Gregory's rival. They promised him the commission, I realized. It was the very commission Gregory had refused him on ethical grounds. Apex assured him that if he helped tear me down and, by extension, weaken Gregory, they would acquire the grid and hand him the broker's fee he so desperately wanted. He wasn't just desperate, Gregory said. He was driven by greed. He believed he could play both sides. He thought he could take Apex's money to drag your name through the mud, pressure me into withdrawing my bid under the weight of scandal, and then walk away with the commission once Apex stepped in to purchase the damaged asset. I leaned back. My father hadn't merely been cruel. He had been an active player in a corporate war, using his own daughter as a disposable pawn. And Blair, I asked, did she know any of this? Blair was the hired help. Sarah said, pulling up another message thread. We got access to the emails between the Sterling Group and Blair. They didn't compensate her with cash. They fed her ego instead. On the screen, a chain of emails appeared, subject lines carefully crafted to entice, flatter, and manipulate. Subject, the face of modern feminism. Subject, why your story needs to be heard. Subject, Vogue. Feature opportunity. They groomed her, Sarah said. They told her that you were the bully, the oppressor. They told her that if she spoke her truth and disrupted your wedding, she would become a viral icon for mental health and toxic family survivors. They promised her a cover story. They promised her a verified checkmark. They played on her jealousy so perfectly it is almost artistic. I looked at the emails. Blair's replies were eager, pathetic. I will do whatever it takes. I just want to be seen. She didn't know about the Apex deal, I said. She didn't know Dad was getting paid $200,000. No, Gregory said. She thought she was getting fame. Dad thought he was getting solvent. Both of them were just puppets for Apex. But there is a loose end, I said. I stood up and walked to the screen. I pointed to a name in the CC field of the Sterling Group emails. A name that had been bothering me since I glanced at the preliminary report an hour ago. Consultant Arthur Vance. Who is Arthur Vance? Gregory asked. I know that name, I said. My mind raced back 3 years, to the worst day of my life at Halcyon Aeronautics. When I was investigated for the data leak, the internal audit was conducted by an external IT security contractor. He was the one who verified the logs. He was the one who said the encryption key was definitely mine. I looked at Sarah. Can you pull up the personnel files from the Halcyon investigation? I have them on my drive. Sarah connected my drive. We pulled up the old PDF. There, at the bottom of the damning report that had ruined my career, was the signature, verified by Arthur Vance, Senior Analyst, Cybersec Solutions. The room went deadly silent. It is the same man, I whispered. Arthur Vance verified the fake logs 3 years ago, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. And now, Arthur Vance is consulting for the PR firm that is fabricating the story about me today. It wasn't a coincidence, Gregory said, his voice turning into ice. Hadley, this means the frame job at Halcyon wasn't just your sister stealing a file. Vance had to be involved to alter the timestamps. A college intern couldn't have hacked the mainframe. Blair stole the file, I said, pacing the room. But Vance made sure the blame stuck to me. Why? Who owned the contract for the drone project you were working on? Gregory asked. It was a government defense contract, I said. But wait, Halcyon was bidding against... I stopped. I looked at the screen. Halcyon was bidding against a subsidiary of Apex Meridian, I said. The pieces clicked together. It was a perfect circle. 3 years ago, Apex wanted to sabotage Halcyon's bid. They paid a corrupt IT auditor Vance to frame the chief engineer me for a security breach. knowing it would disqualify Halcyon from the clearance required for the contract. Blair was just the useful idiot they found inside the building to physically move the data. And now, 3 years later, when I threatened their interests again by marrying Gregory, they called their old asset, Vance, and told him to activate the Stoneford Protocol again. My entire life, I said, my voice shaking with rage, has been collateral damage in a corporate ledger. My sister didn't just betray me. She was a pawn in an industrial espionage operation, twice. They destroyed your career to win a drone contract, Gregory said. And they tried to destroy your marriage to win a power grid. He turned to the lawyers. I want to file everything: defamation, fraud, tortious interference, RICO statutes. I want to bury Apex Meridian so deep they will need a drilling rig to find sunlight. I want to depose the father. I want to depose the sister. I want Vance in handcuffs. No, I said. Gregory stopped. The lawyers stopped. They looked at me. No lawsuits, Gregory asked, stunned. Hadley, they committed felonies. If we sue, I said, it goes to court, it gets sealed. Settlements happen behind closed doors. Apex pays a fine they can afford. My father declares bankruptcy again. Blair writes a tell-all book about the trial. I turned to face them. That is the game they know how to play. They expect us to use lawyers. They expect a battle of attrition. So what do we do? Sarah asked. We act like engineers, I said. We don't just break the machine. We publish the schematic so everyone sees how it is broken. I walked over to the whiteboard. I picked up a marker. Next week, I said, Whitman Harbor Capital is hosting the town hall meeting for the coastal grid acquisition. It is a public forum. The press will be there. The community will be there. And Apex Meridian representatives will be there to present their counteroffer. Yes, Gregory said. It is going to be a bloodbath. It is, I agreed, but not the way they think. I drew a square on the board. We are not going to talk about the grid. We are going to talk about the risk assessment. We are going to present these findings: the money trail, the Vance connection, the emails, the debt, not as a personal grievance, but as a due diligence report on Apex Meridian. I looked at Gregory. We show the community that Apex doesn't just buy infrastructure, they buy families. We show them that the company asking to run their power grid is the same company that pays hackers to frame engineers and pays fathers to sell their daughters. You want to do this live? Gregory asked. In front of the town. I want to look the Apex CEO in the eye, I said. And I want my father to be there. I want Blair to be there. Send them invitations. Tell them we are ready to discuss a settlement before the town hall. They will think we are surrendering, Sarah said. Exactly, I said. Let them think they won. Let them think I am desperate to stop the bleeding. Let them come to the town hall expecting a concession speech. I looked at the map on the screen one last time, the web of lies that had suffocated me for 3 years. I am not going to sue them for money, I said. I am going to bankrupt them of their credibility. I am going to make the name Stoneford mean something again. Not victim, and not thief. It is going to mean the truth. Gregory looked at me. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. We will need to authenticate the Vance connection, he said. I can do that, I said. I still have the original laptop from Halcyon. I never wiped the cache. If Vance tampered with the logs remotely, he left a digital fingerprint. I just didn't know where to look 3 years ago. Now I do. You kept the laptop, Sarah asked. I am an engineer. I said, I never throw away data. I just wait until I have the right code to process it. I capped the marker. The investigation was over. The trial was about to begin, and the courtroom wouldn't be a judge's chamber. It would be the community center of the very town they were trying to exploit. Get the invitations ready, I told Sarah. And tell my father. Tell him to wear his best suit. He is finally going to get the attention he wanted. 3 months had passed since the Chicago conference, and the world had largely moved on to the next scandal. That is the nature of the internet. It is a voracious beast that demands fresh meat every news cycle. For most people, The Stoneford wedding fiasco was just a meme they had scrolled past in October. But for me, the silence that followed was not empty. It was the sound of concrete curing. It was the sound of rebuilding. I was no longer wearing tailored suits or standing on stages. I was standing in mud, shin deep, watching a nor'easter hammer the coast of Maine. I was back in the field, working on the final phase of the Whispering Cove grid integration. The wind was howling at 50 miles per hour, stinging my face with a mixture of rain and sea spray. My hard hat was strapped tight, and my high-visibility jacket was soaked through. But I felt more alive than I ever had in a boardroom. "The voltage regulator is holding," shouted Mike, one of the line technicians, his voice barely audible over the gale. "The bypass worked. Hadley, the neighborhood still has power." I looked toward the town. Through the driving rain, I could see the warm, yellow glow of windows in the houses lining the cliff. A year ago, a storm like this would have knocked out their power for 3 days. Tonight, because of the microgrid we had designed, because of the batteries we had installed, they were warm. They were cooking dinner. They were watching television, completely unaware that out here in the dark, we were holding the line against the Atlantic Ocean. That was the work. It wasn't about applause. It wasn't about viral moments. It was about the binary reality of light versus dark. When a grandmother in a cottage thanked me the next morning at the coffee shop, she didn't thank me for owning my sister on social media. She thanked me because her oxygen machine didn't shut off during the night. That was a currency that actually mattered. Gregory understood this shift. He had watched me shed the skin of the victim bride and fully inhabit the role of the builder. He didn't try to pull me back into the luxury of his world. Instead, he handed me the keys to a new engine. We sat in our kitchen one quiet Sunday morning, a real kitchen this time, in a house we had bought near the project site, not a stage set for a family drama. Gregory slid a thick binder across the oak table. "The paperwork is finalized," he said. I opened it. The title page read, "The Stoneford Resilience Fund." "I don't want my name on it," I had argued weeks ago. "Stoneford is a tainted brand. It means fraud. It means drama." "Then change the definition," Gregory had replied. "Make the name mean something else." And we did. The fund was not a vanity project. It was a tactical intervention. We capitalized it with $5 million of Gregory's private liquidity money. He insisted was my consulting fee for saving him from the Apex Meridian deal. Though we both knew it was just his way of empowering me, the mandate of the fund was specific. We offered full scholarships and legal support to female engineers and data scientists who had been professionally displaced due to systemic bias or false accusation. We were looking for the other Hadleys, the women who had been framed, fired, or silenced because they were inconvenient to a corporate narrative. "You have full autonomy," Gregory said, pouring me a cup of coffee. "I am just the bank. You are the architect. You decide who gets the grants. You decide the strategy." "I have a short list," I said, tapping the binder. "There is a structural engineer in Ohio who was fired for reporting a safety violation that her male boss ignored, and a coder in Silicon Valley who was sued for theft after she proved her company was selling user data. I want to start with them." "Done," Gregory said. The media requests were still coming in. Of course, Vanity Fair wanted a profile. 60 Minutes wanted a sit-down. They wanted the sister versus sister angle. They wanted me to cry about my childhood. I declined every single one. My assistant, a no-nonsense woman named Karen, whom I had hired specifically to be a firewall, sent the same template response to everyone. "Ms. Stoneford is currently focusing on critical infrastructure projects and is unavailable for comment on personal matters. Please refer to the latest quarterly report of the Stoneford Resilience Fund for updates on her work." I let the results speak. Photos of new solar arrays, press releases about scholarship recipients. I became boring. And by becoming boring, I became untouchable. But the past is not a ghost you can banish just by working hard. Sometimes, it knocks on your door wearing a trench coat. It happened on a Tuesday evening. I was leaving the site office, locking the gate. When a sedan pulled up, it was an older model, nondescript. A young man stepped out. He looked terrified. He was wearing a hoodie pulled up over a baseball cap, and he kept checking the empty road behind him. "Ms. Stoneford?" he asked. I kept my hand near the pepper spray in my pocket. "Who are you?" "I used to work for the Sterling Group," he said. His voice was shaking. "I was a junior associate on the Stoneford account, the Paris campaign." I froze. "I am not interested in gossip." "It is not gossip," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a USB drive. "I quit 3 days ago. They are shredding documents. They are purging the servers. They know the Department of Justice is sniffing around because of your husband's lawyers." He held the drive out to me. "I don't want to go to jail for them. I was just following orders. But I saw what they did to the other families. It wasn't just you. They have a playbook." I took the drive. It was warm from his hand. "Why give this to me?" I asked. "Why not the police?" "Because the police will take 2 years to build a case," he said. "And because the Sterling Group has friends in the precinct. You are the one who burned them in Chicago. I figured you would know how to use this without getting me killed." He got back in his car and drove away before I could ask his name. I took the drive to Gregory. We decrypted it that night. What we found was not just evidence, it was a map of the underworld. The drive contained chat logs, internal memos, and strategy documents from the Sterling Group. It confirmed everything we suspected about the Apex Meridian connection. But it added a layer of human filth that was hard to stomach. There were emails mocking Blair. Subject: the crying sister. Body: she is so desperate for validation she will sign anything. Keep feeding her the feminist icon angle. She's eating it up. If she crashes and burns, we can pivot to a mental health crisis narrative and sell that too. They had bet on her destruction. They hadn't just used her, they had planned her obsolescence from day one. "We have them," Gregory said, his face grim. "This is enough to indict the CEO of Apex and the partners at Sterling. We can file this tomorrow." I looked at the screen. At the callous way they spoke about my sister. She was a villain in my story. Yes, but reading this, I realized she was also a victim in theirs. A willing victim, perhaps, but a victim nonetheless. "If we release this now," I said slowly, "Blair gets a life raft." "What do you mean?" "She will see these emails," I said, "and she will say, 'See, I was groomed. I was brainwashed. I am the victim here.' She will go on a talk show and cry about how these evil corporate men manipulated her. She will never take responsibility for the choice she made to board that plane. She will hide behind her own stupidity." "So what?" Gregory asked. "We still win. I don't just want to win the legal battle. Gregory," I said, "I want to break the cycle. If Blair walks away thinking she was just a helpless pawn, she will do it again. She needs to understand that being manipulated doesn't absolve you of pulling the trigger." I put the drive in the safe. "We wait." "Wait for what?" "For the collapse," I said. It didn't take long. 2 days later, the news broke, not about the lawsuit, but about my father. He had suffered a transient ischemic attack, a mini-stroke, while arguing with a creditor in the lobby of a bank. He collapsed in front of the teller. He survived, but he was hospitalized. My mother called me. For the first time in my life, she didn't sound demanding. She sounded broken. She told me they had lost the house. The foreclosure notice had been posted. The money from the deal was gone, spent on the Paris trip, the PR retainers, and my father's gambling debts. They were effectively homeless, living in a rented condo that Blair was paying for with the last of her dwindling savings. "Blair isn't eating," my mother sobbed. "She just sits in her room. She deleted her accounts. She won't talk to us." I listened. I didn't offer money. I didn't offer to fly down. I had learned that you cannot save people who are determined to drown you to stay afloat. "I hope he recovers, Mom," I said, and then I hung up. I went back to work. I focused on the grid. I focused on the scholarship applications. Then, 4 days later, my personal cell phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. but the area code was local. I opened the message. Can you meet me? I am at the coffee shop near the substation, the one with the green awning. No cameras, no parents, just you. It was Blair. She wasn't in New York. She wasn't in Paris. She was here, in Maine, 5 miles from where I was standing. I stared at the screen. My instinct, the survival instinct I had honed over 3 years, screamed at me to delete it. It was a trap. She was wearing a wire. She had a camera crew hidden in the bushes. She wanted a confrontation scene for her comeback documentary, but then I looked at the text again. There were no emojis, no exclamation points, no guilt-tripping language like, after everything I did for you, just a location and a request. I forwarded the text to Gregory. She is here. I typed, Do you want me to come? He replied instantly. No. I wrote back, She asked for me. If I bring you? She puts the mask back on. I need to see what is under the mask. Be careful. Gregory wrote, I will have security track your phone location. If you are there longer than an hour, I am coming in. 30 minutes. I replied. I grabbed my keys and my coat. I drove down the coastal road, the ocean gray and churning on my left. I wasn't going there to forgive her. I wasn't going there to gloat. I was going there because I had the USB drive in my pocket. I had the proof that she was a fool, not a mastermind. And I needed to know if she was finally ready to admit that the boarding pass she left on my kitchen counter cost her more than $15,000. I pulled into the parking lot. The coffee shop was quiet, a local spot for fishermen and utility workers. I saw a figure sitting in the back booth, facing the door. She was wearing a thick wool coat and a beanie. No makeup. She looked smaller than I remembered. She looked like the little sister who used to follow me around the yard before she learned that betrayal was a faster way to get attention. I turned off the engine. I took a deep breath of the cold, salt air. The structural integrity of the Stoneford family had completely failed. The roof had caved in. The walls had buckled. There was nothing left to save. But as I walked toward the door, I realized that was okay. Because you cannot build a lighthouse on a foundation of rotten wood. You have to clear the debris first. And today, I was going to clear the last piece of debris. The coffee shop was quiet, smelling of roasted beans and damp wool. I walked to the back booth where my sister sat. The woman waiting for me bore little resemblance to the curated avatar she presented on Instagram. Blair looked hollowed out. She was wearing a bulky gray sweater that swallowed her frame. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing dark circles under her eyes that no filter could hide. She did not have a latte in front of her. She did not have her phone out to record a secret video. Instead, her hands were resting on a thick, manila envelope. Her knuckles were white. I sat down opposite her. I did not take off my coat. I did not order a drink. You look tired, I said. It was not an insult. It was a data point. I have not slept in 3 days, Blair said. Her voice was raspy, stripped of the vocal fry she usually adopted for her videos. Dad is in the hospital. Mom is sedated. And I am sitting here meeting the sister I tried to destroy because I have nowhere else to go. You have options. Blair, I said calmly. You always have options. You just usually choose the ones that hurt people. She pushed the envelope across the table toward me. I didn't just go to Paris to spite you, she said. It wasn't just about being petty. I know, I replied. It was a job. Blair looked up, surprised. You know, I know you were paid, I said. I know Dad was paid, but I want to hear you say it. I want to hear the terms of the sale. Blair swallowed hard. She looked at the envelope. They approached me 2 months ago, a woman from the Sterling Group. She told me they were working with a private equity firm that wanted to acquire the coastal grid. She said Gregory was the only obstacle. She said if I could create a scandal, something that made you look unstable, or greedy, or fraudulent, it would force Gregory to step down from the deal to manage the crisis. And what was your price? I asked. A show, Blair whispered. They promised me a reality series. They said if I played the role of the truth-teller who exposed her wealthy, arrogant sister, they would bankroll a pilot for a lifestyle brand. They told me I would be a star. Hadley. They told me I would finally be bigger than you. And you believed them, I said. I wanted to believe them, she corrected. I spent my whole life watching you succeed. Watching you get the grades, the degrees, the respect. I just wanted one thing that was mine. So you sold me, I said, for a pilot episode that was never going to air. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy of the wire transfer authorization I had found in the data dump. You thought you were the star of the deal, Blair, I said, sliding the paper toward her. But you weren't. Look at the signature line. Blair looked down. Her eyes scanned the document. She saw the amount $200,000. She saw the recipient, our father's holding company, and then she saw the two signatures at the bottom authorizing the service agreement. One was our father's, the other was our mother's. Blair went perfectly still. Mom signed it. She notarized it, I said. They didn't just sell me. Blair, they sold you. They took the cash to save the house, and they let you do the dirty work. They let you take the heat on social media. They let you destroy your reputation while they cashed the check. Blair stared at the paper. A single tear leaked out, but she wiped it away angrily. This was not a performance. This was the moment she realized she was not the player. She was the pieces. They knew, she whispered. They knew I was being set up to fail, and they took the money anyway. They are not victims, I said, and neither are you. You boarded the plane. You posted the photos. You broke the wine glass. I was following a script, she hissed. The PR firm texted me every caption. They told me when to scream. They told me when to cry. And you followed orders, I said. Just like you followed orders 3 years ago at Halcyon. The air in the booth shifted. The mention of Halcyon hit her like a physical blow. I don't know what you are talking about, she said, looking away. Arthur Vance, I said. She flinched. The PR firm that managed your Paris trip hired a consultant named Arthur Vance, I continued. He is the same IT security analyst who framed me for the data leak 3 years ago. The same man who helped you upload my files to the contest server. I leaned forward. It is the same network. Blair, Apex Meridian used you to steal the drone data to hurt Halcyon, and they used you to stage the wedding disaster to hurt Gregory. You have been their favorite tool for 3 years. Blair looked at me with terror in her eyes. She realized that I wasn't just talking about a family feud anymore. I was talking about corporate espionage. What do you want? She asked. Her voice trembled. Do you want me to apologize? I will do it. I will record a video right now. I will tell everyone I lied. I don't want an apology, I said. An apology is just words. I want a signature. I placed a thick legal document on the table next to the wire transfer record. This is an affidavit, I said. It is a sworn statement detailing your involvement with Apex Meridian, the Sterling Group, and Arthur Vance. It outlines every instruction they gave you, every payment they made to our parents, and the specific timeline of the smear campaign. Blair looked at the document as if it were a loaded gun. If I sign this, I admit to everything. I admit to the fraud. I admit to the harassment. I will never get a brand deal again. I will be unhireable. Yes, I said. You will be radioactive. Why would I do that? She pleaded. Hadley, please, just let me disappear. I will go away. I won't bother you again. No, I said. Because if you disappear, they win. They will just find another desperate person to use against the next engineer who stands in their way. I looked her in the eye. Here is the choice. Blair, option A. You sign this affidavit. You become a cooperating witness for the Department of Justice and for Gregory's lawsuit against Apex. You lose your reputation, but you gain immunity from prosecution for the fraud. I paused. Option B. You walk out of here, and tomorrow morning, Gregory files a civil suit against you. Mom and Dad for $5 million in damages. We will subpoena your texts. We will subpoena the PR firm. We will drag this out in court for 5 years, and when we are done, you won't just be unhireable, You will be bankrupt and potentially in prison for participating in a racketeering scheme. Blair looked at me. She searched my face for a hint of the sister who used to cover for her when she broke curfew. She looked for the Hadley who would yield to keep the peace. She found only the engineer. "You would really do that," she whispered. "You would send your own family to prison." "I am not sending you anywhere," I said. "I am presenting you with the consequences of your own architecture. You built this cage. Blair, I am just holding the key." "But I am your sister," she said, her voice cracking. "I know," I said softly. "That is why I am giving you the pen instead of the handcuffs." I uncapped the pen and set it down. Blair looked at the pen. She looked out the window at the gray ocean. She looked at the empty coffee cup. She realized, finally, that the audience was gone. There were no cameras. There were no likes. There was just the cold, hard reality of the law. She picked up the pen. Her hand shook, but she pressed the tip to the paper. She signed, and in that moment, the twist that she didn't see coming, the one I had prepared for, snapped into place. "Thank you," I said. I took the document and verified the signature. "Is it over?" she asked. "Can I go?" "Not quite," I said. "By signing this, you admitted to a pattern of behavior involving Arthur Vance. That gives my legal team the probable cause we need to reopen the Halcyon case." Blair's eyes widened. "The statute of limitations hasn't run out on the industrial theft," I explained. "With your testimony that Vance was the handler for the wedding scheme. We can prove he was the handler for the data breach. We can prove he altered the logs. But that implicates me in the theft too," Blair stammered. "It does," I said. "But since you are a cooperating witness, your testimony against Vance the bigger fish will likely earn you a suspended sentence. You won't go to jail for Halcyon, Blair, but you will be the reason Arthur Vance goes to jail." She stared at me. She realized I had checkmated her on a board she didn't even know we were playing. I had used her confession to clear my name not just from the wedding scandal, but from the career-ending lie of 3 years ago. "You planned this," she said. "You knew I would come here." "I hoped you would," I said. "I hoped that somewhere inside the influencer, there was still a human being who wanted to stop running." I stood up. I put the folder in my bag. "Come with me," I said. "Where? I want to show you something." We drove in silence to the edge of the project site. The sun was beginning to set, casting a bruised purple light over the ocean. I led her to the newly constructed operations center of the Stoneford Resilience Fund. It was a sleek, modern building made of glass and sustainable timber, designed to weather the fiercest storms. In the lobby, there was a wall. It was made of brushed steel. Etched into the metal were the names of the first 20 recipients of our scholarships and legal grants. "Read them," I said. Blair walked up to the wall. She read the names: Sarah Jenkins, wrongful termination; Elena Rodriguez, whistleblower protection; Maya Patel, patent theft recovery. "What is this?" Blair asked. "This is what I built with the wreckage," I said. "Every dollar Gregory and I recovered from the lawsuit against Apex, every dollar we saved by canceling the big wedding, it went here. These women are getting their lives back because of what happened to me." Blair touched the cold metal. She turned to me, and for the first time, her eyes were clear. "Are you showing me this to tell me you forgive me?" she asked. "Is this reconciliation?" I looked at her. I looked at the sister who had sold me for a pilot episode. I looked at the woman who had signed the affidavit only because she was cornered. "No," I said. "This isn't forgiveness, Blair." "Then what is it?" "It is a boundary," I said. "This wall is a reminder. The name Stoneford is on this building. It is on these grants. It stands for resilience. It stands for truth." I stepped closer to her. "You and Mom and Dad, you don't get to define that name anymore. You don't get to use it as an excuse to hurt people. I have taken the name back. I have repurposed it." "So we are done?" she asked quietly. "As a family?" "We are done as a support system for your dysfunction." I said, I will not hate you. I will not attack you online. I will ensure you have legal counsel for the testimony. But I will not invite you to dinner. I will not fix your messes. And I will never, ever let you hold the power to hurt me again. Blair looked at the wall again. She nodded slowly. She understood. She was free, but she was alone. "Goodbye, Hadley," she whispered. "Goodbye, Blair," I said. She walked out of the glass doors and into the fading light. She looked small against the backdrop of the massive wind turbines turning slowly on the ridge. I stayed. I walked through the operations center and out onto the observation deck. The sun had dipped below the horizon. The sky was dark. And then it happened. The timer I had programmed clicked over, below me. The entire coastal grid flickered once, and then stabilized. The new LED streetlights in the town of Whispering Cove hummed to life. The windows of the houses lit up in a warm, synchronized wave. The lighthouse on the point beamed a strong, steady shaft of light across the black water. It was perfect. It was efficient. It was unbreakable. Gregory walked out onto the deck. He stood beside me, not touching me, just sharing the space. He handed me a tablet. "The press release is out," he said. "Apex Meridian has filed for bankruptcy protection. Vance is in custody. Your record at Halcyon has been officially expunged." I didn't look at the tablet. I looked at the lights. "We won," he said. "No," I corrected him. "We didn't win a fight. Gregory, we finished a job." I leaned against the railing, feeling the vibration of the turbines in the floor. Revenge is often described as a fire, something that burns and destroys. But looking at the town glowing in the night, I realized that was a primitive definition. Real revenge isn't about burning your enemy's house down. It is about building a fortress so strong, so bright, and so essential that their attempts to burn it only illuminate your work for the rest of the world to see. My family had tried to leave me in the dark, and in doing so, they had forced me to become the person who keeps the lights on. I watched the grid hold steady against the night wind. "Let there be light," I whispered, and there was. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope Hadley's journey reminded you that sometimes the best way to fight back is to build something better. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please drop your country in the comments below so we can see how far this story has traveled. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the channel Juliet Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to us. Stay strong and keep building.